Don't move. The command cut through the diner before anyone even looked up. A hand slammed onto Marcus Reed's shoulder, hard enough to rattle the coffee in front of him. The cup shook. A thin line of dark liquid slid over the rim and onto the table. Stand up. Now. The officer's voice was low, tight, already decided. Marcus didn't move. Not yet. His fork hovered midair, a piece of eggs untouched. Something about the moment felt off. The kind of off you couldn't explain right away. A chair scraped somewhere behind him. Someone whispered, then stopped. Marcus slowly set the fork down. Metal clicked against ceramic. Is there a problem, officer? His voice was calm. Too calm for the tension building in the room. The officer didn't answer right away. He reached for Marcus's wrist instead. Firm. Cold fingers closing like it was routine. You match a description, he said. No details. No explanation. Just enough to take control. Marcus's shoulders stiffened under the grip. Not fear. Something else. A quiet restraint. He glanced at the window beside him. Sunlight hit the glass at an angle, reflecting back a distorted version of the room. People watching. Pretending not to. Something wasn't right. A woman near the counter lowered her gaze too quickly. A man in a booth shifted, then froze again. No one spoke up. I've been sitting here for 40 minutes, Marcus said. Still calm. Still measured. The officer's grip tightened just a fraction. Enough to feel. That's not what I asked. His other hand moved to his belt. Not rushed. Practiced. The faint clink of metal followed. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. His jaw tightened just slightly. Then relaxed again. He exhaled once, slow and steady. Like he'd done this before. Or something close to it. Stand up, the officer repeated. This time louder. The room reacted. A glass paused halfway to someone's lips. A cook leaned out from the kitchen window, eyes narrowing. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder now. Marcus pushed his chair back. Slow. Controlled. Wood legs dragged against tile with a low scrape. He stood. Straight. Shoulders squared, but not aggressive. Just, steady. The officer stepped closer. Too close. His shadow cut across Marcus's chest. Hands where I can see them. Marcus raised them. Open palms. No sudden moves. The light above flickered once. Brief. Easy to miss. But Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. A little girl near the far booth peeked over the seat. Her eyes wide. Confused. Mom, what did he do? She whispered. Her mother didn't answer. She just pulled her closer. That silence said more than words. The officer shifted his stance. One step to the side. Blocking Marcus from the exit. Intentional. Deliberate. Turn around. Marcus hesitated. Just a second. Not resistance. Calculation. Then he began to turn. Slow. Careful. His eyes swept the room one last time. Faces. Avoiding him. Watching him. Judging him. Or maybe just afraid. Something deeper sat under it all. Something unspoken. The air felt heavier now. Thicker. Like the room was holding its breath. The officer reached for his wrist again. This time higher. Preparing. The metal in his hand caught the light. A sharp glint. Too bright for such a quiet place. Marcus felt it before it touched him. That shift. That moment where things cross a line. And once they do, they don't go back. He didn't pull away. He didn't argue. But something in his posture changed. Subtle. Almost invisible. The kind of change you only notice if you're looking for it. The officer didn't notice. Not yet. But someone else did. And they had just stepped through the door. The metal clicked once, sharp and clean, but the officer did not close the cuff. Not yet. His grip shifted higher on Marcus's wrist, adjusting, testing control. Marcus felt the pressure change. Subtle, but intentional. He kept his hand steady. Palms open. Breathing slow. The kind of breathing you learn when reacting makes things worse. Something about the room had changed. It was not louder. It was quieter. Too quiet. The hum from the refrigerator faded into the background. Even the clatter from the kitchen slowed. People were listening now. Not watching. Listening. The officer leaned in slightly. Close enough that his voice dropped. Do not make this difficult. Marcus did not turn his head. He did not look back. I am not the one making it. Difficult, he said. Calm. Even. The words landed flat, but they stayed in the air longer than expected. The officer paused. Just for a second. Then his jaw tightened. He did not like that answer. Something flickered in his expression. Control slipping, just a fraction. A waitress near the counter shifted her weight. Her hand hovered over a coffee pot. She did not pour. She did not move closer. She just watched. Something was off. Marcus could feel it now. Not just tension. Attention. Focused attention. Like the room was leaning in. Waiting for something. The officer adjusted his stance again. 1 foot back. 1 forward. Blocking. Always blocking. His hand moved toward the cuffs once more. The metal caught the light again. A brief flash across Marcus's peripheral vision. He noticed. Of course he noticed. But he did not react. Not outwardly. A man at the far booth cleared his throat. Too loud for the silence. Then stopped, as if he regretted it immediately. The little girl was still watching. She had not looked away. Her eyes moved from the officer to Marcus, then back again. Trying to understand something no one explained. Mom, she whispered again, softer this time, he looks okay. Her mother pressed a hand gently against her shoulder. Do not, she said quietly. Not angry. Just careful. That word carried weight. Marcus heard it. The officer did not. Or maybe he ignored it. His attention stayed fixed. Narrow. Locked on the task in front of him. Turn fully around, the officer said. His voice was louder now. For the room. Not just for Marcus. Marcus completed the turn. Slow. Controlled. His back now facing the officer. Facing the door. He could not see it. But he felt something shift behind him. Air moving. A presence. Not loud. Not rushed. Just, there. The bell above the door gave a faint sound. Barely a chime. More like a breath of metal. It should not have mattered. But it did. Marcus felt it before anyone spoke. The kind of awareness that comes from experience. From time spent reading rooms without looking. The officer finally reached for the second cuff. His fingers brushed the edge of Marcus's wrist. Cold. Precise. But his movement slowed. Just. Slightly. Not enough to stop. Just enough to hesitate. Something behind him had caught his attention. He did not turn yet. He resisted the instinct. But the pause was there. Small. Real. A shadow stretched across the floor. Long clean lines. Not from the window. The angle was wrong. It moved forward. Step by step. Measured. Unhurried. The sound of boots followed. Soft against tile. Not heavy. Not loud. But deliberate. Every step placed with purpose. The kind of walk that does not need to rush. Because it never has to. The waitress noticed first. Her eyes shifted toward the door. Then widened. Not fear. Recognition. She straightened without thinking. The man at the booth turned next. Then another. One by one, heads angled slightly toward the same point. No one spoke. No one pointed. But the focus moved. Like a current passing through the room. The officer felt it now. He had to. His shoulders tightened. His hand hovered near the cuff. Suspended. Waiting. For what, he did not know. Yet. Marcus felt the shift behind him grow stronger. Closer. The presence stopped just a few feet away. Close enough to be felt without contact. Close enough to change everything. The officer finally exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Then he began to turn his head. Just a little. Just enough to see who had walked in. The officer's head turned just enough to catch the figure in his peripheral vision, and for the first time, his grip loosened without meaning to. It was not fear. Not yet. But something in his posture shifted. A recalculation. Marcus felt it instantly. The pressure on his wrist eased by a fraction, like a decision had paused mid-thought. The boots stopped behind him. No rush. No sound after that. Just presence. The kind that filled space without asking for it. The officer straightened slightly, shoulders pulling back as if remembering something. Authority adjusting to a new variable. He turned more fully now. Slow. Careful. His eyes lifted, scanning upward before settling. The man standing there did not speak. Not immediately. He did not need to. His uniform said enough. Dark navy. Pressed. Clean lines. Metals catching the overhead light in small, sharp glints. Not flashy. Just. Precise. Every detail in place. The kind of detail that does not happen by accident. The room felt it. Everyone did. The waitress set the coffee pot down without realizing it. It touched the counter softer than expected. No clatter. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. The officer blinked once. Then again. His hand hovered near the cuff, still not closing it. Is there a problem here? The voice came calm. Low. Not loud. But it carried. It did not ask for attention. It took it. The officer's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight. No, sir, he said quickly, almost too quickly. Then corrected himself. I mean, I am handling a situation. Something about his tone had changed. Subtle, but clear. The edge from before was gone. Replaced by something more controlled. More careful. The man in uniform took one step closer. Not into the officer's space. Just enough to be seen clearly. To be understood. His eyes moved from the officer to Marcus. A brief glance. Measured. Then back again. That glance lingered for a fraction longer than expected. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. Something passed in that moment. Not recognition. Not yet. But awareness. The officer followed the glance. His focus shifted between them now. Trying to connect something. Failing. He matches a description, the officer said again. Repeating it like it would anchor the situation. Make it stable again. It did not. The man in uniform nodded once. Slow. Neutral. And what description would that be? The question landed softly. But it stayed. The officer opened his mouth, then paused. Just for a second. Searching for words he had already used. They did not sound the same now. Not in this room. Not with this presence behind him. There was a report, he said. Nearby. Suspect was seen in the area. Vague. Thinner than before. The man in uniform did not interrupt. He did not challenge. He simply listened. That made it worse. The silence stretched. The officer felt it. He cleared his throat lightly. He fits the general, he stopped. The phrase did not finish. It hung incomplete. The little girl's eyes moved again. Back to Marcus. Then to the man in uniform. Her confusion shifted into something else. Curiosity. The kind that senses a story before it is told. Marcus stood still. Hands still raised. Back straight. But now his breathing had changed. Slower. More grounded. Like he had found something solid in the moment. The officer's hand lowered slightly. Not fully. Just enough to show hesitation. That hesitation was new. And everyone saw it. The waitress leaned in just a bit. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to hear better. The man in uniform finally took another step. This time closer to Marcus. Not touching. Not interfering. Just present. His gaze dropped briefly to Marcus's hands. Then to the cuff. Then back to the officer. A simple sequence. But it said everything. The officer followed that gaze. His eyes landed on his own hand. On the cuff. On the space where it should have closed by now. He had not realized how long he had paused. The moment stretched too far. And now it could not be ignored. Finish what you were doing, the man in uniform said. Calm. Even. No pressure. Just a statement. But something in the way he said it made the words heavier than expected. The officer hesitated again. Longer this time. His fingers tightened slightly around the metal. Then loosened. His eyes flicked back up. Searching the man's face. Looking for something. Permission. Confirmation. Or maybe a reason to stop. He did not find it. Not clearly. Marcus felt the shift behind him grow sharper. More defined. Like the moment was about to turn. But not yet. Not fully. The officer drew in a slow breath. Then another. His decision was still hanging. And everyone in the room could feel it teetering. The officer's fingers hovered over the cuff, caught between action and doubt, and for a moment, he did nothing. That stillness stretched longer than it should have. Marcus felt it in the air behind him. The room was no longer waiting for noise. It was waiting for a decision. The man in uniform did not move. He did not repeat himself. He simply stood there, close enough to feel, far enough to not interfere. That made the silence heavier. The officer swallowed once. His throat moved. Small detail. But visible. He shifted his stance again, like trying to regain control of something slipping away. Sir, with respect, he began, his voice lower now, more measured, this is a routine stop. The word routine landed weak. It did not match the room. It did not match the eyes watching him. Something about it felt forced. The man in uniform tilted his head slightly. Not disagreement. Not agreement. Just acknowledgement. Routine requires clarity, he said. Calm. No edge. But the words pressed inward. The officer's gaze flicked toward Marcus again. Then back. He tightened his grip on the cuff, as if reminding himself of the task. But his hand did not move forward. Not yet. Marcus kept his hands raised. Shoulders relaxed, but not loose. Controlled. Every breath measured. He was not looking at the officer now. He was looking straight ahead. At the far wall. At nothing in particular. But something in his posture had changed. A quiet certainty had settled in. The kind that does not come from the moment. It comes from something before it. Something learned. The waitress shifted again. This time she took a step closer. Careful. Quiet. Like she did not want to disturb whatever was unfolding. Her eyes moved between the officer and the man in uniform. Then to Marcus. Something clicked in her expression. Recognition? Maybe. Or something close to it. The little girl leaned further over the booth now. Her fingers gripped the edge of the seat. She was not scared anymore. Just focused. Watching something she did not fully understand. "Mom," she whispered again, "why is he not moving?" Her mother did not answer. Not because she did not know. But because she was watching too. The officer exhaled slowly. Then squared his shoulders again. Trying to reclaim ground. "He fits the description," he repeated. The same words. But they sounded thinner now. Less certain. The man in uniform took another small step forward. Not closer to the officer. Closer to Marcus. His eyes settled on Marcus's back. Studying. Not searching. Just, confirming something. Marcus felt that gaze. It was different. Not judging. Not accusing. It carried weight, but not pressure. He did not turn. But his fingers shifted slightly. A small movement. Almost nothing. But it meant something. The officer noticed that. Instantly. His attention snapped back. "Do not move," he said sharply. The edge returned. Brief. Reflexive. But it did not land the same way this time. The room did not shrink under it. It held. The man in uniform did not react to the tone. He simply looked at the officer. Steady. Unblinking. That look lingered a second too long. The officer felt it. His voice softened without him intending it. "I am just following procedure," he added. A justification now. Not a command. That shift mattered. The man in uniform nodded once. "Then follow it completely," he said. The words were simple. But they carried something deeper. The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger. In thought. His grip on the cuff loosened again. The metal dipped lower. He hesitated. Longer this time. Marcus felt the tension ease just a fraction more. Enough to notice. Enough to change the rhythm of the moment. The air moved again behind him. Subtle. The man in uniform shifted his weight. Not stepping away. Not stepping closer. Just adjusting. Like he was preparing for something. Or waiting for something to reveal itself. The waitress leaned in just a bit more. Her eyes locked onto Marcus's face now. Not his posture. His face. She was trying to place him. Something about him did not match what was happening. Something deeper. The officer followed her gaze without realizing it. His eyes moved from Marcus's hands, to his shoulders, then slowly upward. To his face. He paused there. Something changed. It was quick. Almost invisible. But it was there. A flicker of recognition. Or maybe confusion. His brow tightened slightly. He looked again. Closer this time. Like he was seeing something he missed before. The cuff in his hand lowered another inch. No one spoke. No one moved. The moment stretched thin. Ready to break in either direction. And the officer realized he was no longer sure which way it would go. The officer's eyes stayed on Marcus's face longer than they should have, and something in his expression shifted again, quieter this time, deeper. It was not recognition yet. It was doubt. The kind that creeps in slowly and refuses to leave. His grip on the cuff loosened another fraction. The metal dipped lower, catching less light now. Marcus did not move. Not a single inch. His breathing stayed even, controlled, almost detached from the tension surrounding him. But inside, something had aligned. A calm that did not belong to this moment alone. The officer blinked once, then again, like trying to clear something from his vision. He studied Marcus more carefully now. The posture. The stillness. The way he held his hands without trembling. None of it matched what he expected. Something was off. The man in uniform noticed that shift immediately. His gaze narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. He was watching the officer now, not Marcus. Measuring the hesitation. Letting it grow. You said he matched a description, the man in uniform said quietly. Then describe it. The officer inhaled, but the words did not come as quickly this time. He hesitated. Just a second too long. Male, he started. Mid-30s. Dark jacket. His voice slowed as he spoke. Each detail felt weaker than the last. He glanced down at Marcus's jacket. It was not dark. It was worn brown. Faded at the seams. Not new. Not sharp. Something didn't line up. The waitress caught that glance. Her eyes flicked to the jacket too. Then back to the officer. Her lips pressed together. She knew. Or at least, she felt it. The little girl leaned even closer now, her chin resting on the booth edge. She whispered again, softer than before. He does not look like a bad guy. This time, her mother did not shush her. She just listened. The officer cleared his throat again. A small, nervous habit. He was reported nearby, he added, trying to recover ground. But the sentence trailed at the end. Not solid. Not convincing. The man in uniform took one slow breath. Then another. He did not interrupt. He let the officer hear himself. That was enough. Marcus felt the shift clearly now. The pressure in the room had changed direction. It was no longer pressing down on him. It was turning. Redirecting. Subtle, but undeniable. The officer's hand dropped slightly. The cuff now hung loosely at his side. Not put away. Not used. Just there. Waiting. His eyes moved. Again over Marcus's face. This time slower. Searching for something specific. Something he could not name yet. Marcus's expression did not change. But his eyes did. Just a fraction. A quiet awareness. Like he knew what was coming before it arrived. The man in uniform stepped half a pace closer. Still not touching. Still not interfering. But now close enough that the distance between them carried weight. "What is your name?" he asked. Not to the officer. To Marcus. The question cut through the tension cleanly. The officer stiffened. That was not part of his process. Not his question to answer. But he did not interrupt. Not this time. Marcus took a slow breath. His voice came steady. Marcus Reed. The name settled into the room like a dropped stone in still water. Small at first. Then spreading outward. The man in uniform repeated it softly. Read. Not questioning. Confirming. Something in his tone shifted. Barely noticeable. But real. The officer caught that. His eyes flicked between them again. Faster now. Trying to connect something that was slipping just out of reach. Have you run his identification? The man in uniform asked. Calm. Direct. The officer hesitated again. Then shook his head slightly. Not yet, he admitted. The words came out lower than before. Less certain. That mattered. The waitress's eyes widened just a little. That was it. That was the break. The missing step. The room felt it. Even if no one said it out loud. The man in uniform nodded once. Then you are not finished with your procedure. The sentence was simple. But it carried direction. The officer looked down at the cuff again. Then at Marcus's hands. Then back at his face. His jaw tightened. Not in anger. In conflict. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. Just a few inches. Not enough to defy. Just enough to signal something had changed. The officer noticed. But he did not react the same way this time. He did not snap. He did not command. He just watched. The moment stretched again. Thinner now. Closer to breaking. The man in uniform shifted his gaze back to Marcus. Studying him more closely. This time, something in his eyes sharpened. Like a memory rising to the surface. Not fully formed yet. But close. Very close. And the officer realized, too late, that he might have stopped the wrong man. The name lingered in the air longer than it should have, and the man in uniform did not look away this time. His eyes stayed on Marcus, steady, searching, as if something behind that name had just unlocked. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to matter. Marcus held that gaze for a brief second. Then lowered his eyes again. Not submissive. Controlled. The kind of movement that comes from discipline, not fear. The officer noticed that exchange. Something tightened in his chest. He could not explain it, but the balance in the room had shifted again. He felt it slipping. Slowly. Quietly. Identification, the officer said, his voice sharper than before, trying to reclaim direction. The word cut in, breaking the silence. Marcus nodded once. Small. Measured. He lowered his hands fully now. Slowly, so there would be no misunderstanding. The officer watched every movement. Closely. His body leaned forward just a fraction, instinctively cautious. Marcus reached into his back pocket. Careful. No sudden motion. The leather of his wallet creased softly as he pulled it out. The sound was small, but in that silence, it carried. Something about that sound felt heavier than it should. The waitress leaned closer again. Not stepping in. Just watching. The man in uniform did not move. But his eyes followed the wallet. Focused. Intent. Marcus opened it with one hand. Smooth. Practiced. He slid a card out. Held it between two fingers. Visible. Clear. No hesitation. The officer took it. His fingers brushed Marcus's briefly. Cold. Then he stepped back half a step. Space. He needed space now. He looked down at the card. His eyes scanned it once. Then again. Slower this time. Something caught. His brow tightened. Not confusion. Recognition trying to form. The man in uniform saw that immediately. His posture shifted slightly. Not forward. Not back. Just, ready. The officer's grip on the card changed. He held it firmer now. Like it might slip away if he did not. Marcus Reed, he read under his breath. The same name. But now attached to something real. Something documented. His eyes moved lower on the card. Then paused. A flicker passed across his face. Quick. But unmistakable. The waitress caught it. So did the man in uniform. Marcus did not look up. But he felt it. That shift again. Stronger this time. The officer swallowed once. His throat moved. He read the line again. Slower. As if making sure he was not mistaken. His shoulders straightened. Then stiffened. Something was not aligning with what he expected. Where are you coming from? The officer asked. His voice was different now. Less force. More uncertainty. Marcus answered without hesitation. Breakfast, he said simply. No explanation. No defense. Just the truth in its simplest form. The officer nodded once. But it was automatic. Not thoughtful. His attention stayed on the card. His eyes scanned the lower corner again. Then up to Marcus's face. Then back down. A loop. Repeating. Something was clicking into place. Slowly. The man in uniform took a quiet breath. His gaze dropped briefly to the card in the officer's hand. Then back to Marcus. Then back again. He was connecting it now. Piece by piece. The waitress shifted again. This time she leaned slightly over the counter. Just enough to see. Her eyes narrowed. Trying to read what the officer was seeing. The little girl stood up on her knees now. She could not see the card. But she could see the faces. And the faces told her enough. Mom, she whispered, something changed. Her mother nodded slightly. Without taking her eyes off the scene. The officer's fingers tightened around the card. Then loosened. He exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped just a fraction. The tension in his posture cracked. Not fully. But enough. He looked at Marcus again. Longer this time. Studying him in a different way. Not as a suspect. As something else. Something he had not considered before. The cuff in his other hand lowered completely now. Hanging at his side. Forgotten. The metal no longer caught the light. It did not matter anymore. The man in uniform stepped closer. One small step. Close enough to see the card clearly. Close enough to confirm what he already suspected. His eyes moved across the surface once. Quick. Then stopped. That was it. The moment. Something settled in his expression. Clear now. No doubt. He lifted his gaze to Marcus again. This time, there was recognition. Not loud. Not dramatic. But undeniable. Marcus felt it. Before the officer even spoke. Before the room could react. That quiet shift. The kind that changes everything without a single word. The officer looked back down at the card one last time. Then slowly, he turned it slightly toward the man in uniform. The card tilted in the officer's hand, just enough for the man in uniform to see it clearly, and the moment his eyes landed on it, everything in his posture went still. Not frozen. Grounded. Like a decision had just locked into place. He did not reach for it. He did not need to. His gaze moved once across the surface, then lifted back to Marcus. This time, there was no searching left. Only certainty. The officer felt that shift immediately. It ran through him like a quiet current. His grip on the card loosened without thinking. Is there something I should know, sir? He asked, but his voice had changed again. Lower now. Careful. The man in uniform did not answer right away. He took one slow breath, then another, as if choosing his words with precision. The room leaned in without moving. Even the kitchen had gone still. Marcus stood where he was, hands now lowered at his sides, shoulders steady. He did not look back. But he felt the weight of that recognition behind him. "Officer," the man in uniform said, calm and measured, "how long have you been on this call?" The question was simple. But it landed differently than expected. The officer blinked once. Caught off guard. "About 3 minutes," he answered. "Maybe 4. He was not sure why that mattered. But it did. The man in uniform nodded slightly. "And in that time," he continued, "you have not verified identity, confirmed details, or completed your report." Each point landed clean. No accusation. Just facts. The officer shifted his weight again. This time, it felt smaller. Less certain. "I was in the process," he said quickly. But the words felt thin. He heard it himself. The man in uniform's gaze did not move. "Process requires sequence," he replied. "And sequence matters." The officer swallowed. His fingers tightened briefly around the card, then relaxed. He looked down at it again. Now, the information felt heavier. Not just a name. Something more. Something he should have noticed earlier. The waitress leaned closer, her eyes narrowing further. She could not read the card, but she could read the room. And the room had shifted. Again. The little girl stood fully on the seat now, her small hands gripping the top edge. She whispered softly, "He is not in trouble anymore." Her voice carried just enough to be heard. No one corrected her. Marcus exhaled slowly. Almost silently. But it was the first time his breath had changed since the officer touched him. A release. Small, but real. The man in uniform stepped half a pace closer to the officer now. Close enough to lower his voice, but not so close as to intimidate. "You are holding the identification of a man who has served," he said quietly. The officer's head lifted. His eyes met the man's again. "Sir." The word slipped out before he could stop it. Something inside him had already shifted into a different mode. Respect, instinctive and unplanned. The man in uniform did not raise his voice. "Look again," he said. Just that. Nothing more. The officer looked down. Slower this time. Careful. His eyes moved line by line. Then stopped. There. That detail. The one he had skimmed before. His brow tightened. Then lifted slightly. Understanding moved in. Not all at once. But enough. His shoulders dropped another inch. The tension in his stance broke further. The cuff at his side swung lightly as his grip loosened. It tapped softly against his leg. A quiet sound. But in that silence, it echoed. The waitress's eyes widened just a little more. She leaned back slightly now. Like she finally understood what she was seeing. The man in uniform shifted his gaze back to Marcus. "Mr. Reed," he said, his tone steady, respectful now, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." The word settled into the room like a soft correction. Not loud. But undeniable. Marcus did not turn. Not yet. His head tilted just a fraction. A sign he heard it. A sign he was listening. But he did not speak. Not yet. The officer's throat tightened. He looked at Marcus again. Really looked this time. Not at his clothes. Not at his posture. At him. As a person. Something in that look changed everything. The assumptions he had walked in with no longer held. They could not. The card in his hand felt different now. He turned it slightly, then back again. Like confirming it would not change. It did not. The man in uniform took a slow breath. Then spoke again. "I am going to ask you to release him," he said. Calm. Clear. No room for confusion. The officer did not respond immediately. His mouth opened slightly. Then closed. His eyes moved from the card, to Marcus, then back to the man in uniform. The decision was there now. Clear. Simple. But heavy. And for a brief moment, he hesitated. The hesitation stretched just long enough for everyone to feel it, and the officer knew at the moment his hand refused to move. The cuff hung at his side, no longer part of the moment. Just a piece of metal with nowhere to go. His eyes shifted again, from the man in uniform to Marcus, then back. The choice was no longer hidden. It was visible. Measurable. "Sir," the officer said slowly, his voice tighter now, "I still have a report to complete." It sounded like a defense, but it lacked force. The man in uniform did not react immediately. He let the words sit. Let the officer hear them himself. Then he nodded once. "Then complete it correctly," he said. Calm. Direct. No raised tone. But the meaning landed deeper than before. The officer swallowed. His fingers adjusted around the card again, but this time there was no urgency in the movement. Only thought. Careful, slower thought. He looked down once more, scanning the details like they might change if he stared long enough. They did not. The same name. The same record. The same quiet weight behind it. Something inside him settled. Not comfortably. But firmly. The waitress eased back another step. Not retreating. Just giving space to what was unfolding. Her eyes softened now, the tension in her shoulders loosening. She was no longer waiting for something bad to happen. She was watching something shift. The little girl lowered herself slowly back. Onto the seat. Her hand stayed on the edge, but her grip relaxed. "He is okay," she whispered, almost to herself this time. No one answered. But no one disagreed either. Marcus stood still, his hands now resting loosely at his sides. He had not turned around yet. Not fully. He did not need to. The room had already turned for him. The officer exhaled slowly. A longer breath this time. He stepped back half a step. Space opened between him and Marcus. Small. But visible. That distance said more than any words. He looked at the cuff in his hand, then down at the card again. Then finally, he lowered both. Completely. The metal rested against his leg. Still. Quiet. "Mr. Reed," he said, his voice different now, stripped of its earlier edge, "you are not under arrest." The words came out steady, but something underneath them trembled slightly. Not fear. Awareness. Marcus did not respond immediately. He took one slow breath. Then another. The air felt different now. Lighter. But not finished. Not yet. The man in uniform watched closely. Not Marcus. The officer. Measuring the follow-through. Waiting for it to be complete. The officer cleared his throat again. A habit returning under pressure. "I am going to need to verify the report," he added, quieter now. More procedural. More careful. The man in uniform nodded once. "That would be appropriate," he said. No praise. No criticism. Just acknowledgement. The officer handed the card back. His fingers no longer gripped tightly. They released it cleanly. Without hesitation. Marcus took it the same way he had offered it. Calm. Controlled. No sudden movement. No reaction beyond what was necessary. He slid it back into his wallet, then into his pocket. Smooth. Practiced. Like this was not new. But something about this moment felt different. The officer noticed that too. Something in Marcus's stillness now felt heavier. Not tense. Grounded. The kind of presence that did not need to prove anything. The man in uniform shifted slightly, his gaze moving between them one last time. The room followed that movement without realizing it. A silent current passing through everyone present. The waitress reached for the coffee pot again. This time, she poured. The sound of liquid filling a cup broke the tension just enough. A return to something normal. But not fully. Not yet. The officer took another step back. His posture straightened, but it was not the same posture as before. It had changed. Subtle. But real. "You are free to go," he said. The words landed softer this time. Less command. More acknowledgement. Marcus finally turned. Slow. Measured. He faced the officer now. For the first time since the moment began. His eyes met the officer's directly. No anger. No relief. Just a steady, unreadable calm. That look held for a second. Maybe two. Long enough to settle something neither of them said out loud. The officer felt it. Clearly. Then Marcus gave a small nod. Nothing more. No words. He turned slightly toward the door. The man in uniform stepped aside without being asked. A clear path opened. Simple. Unspoken. But as Marcus took his first step forward, the man in uniform spoke again, and this time, his voice carried something different. "Mr. Reed." The voice stopped him before his second step fully landed. It was not loud. But it carried weight that reached across the room without effort. Marcus paused. Not stiff. Not tense. Just still. His hand hovered near the door handle, fingers inches from the metal. He did not turn immediately. The diner held its breath again. The waitress froze mid-pour. The stream of coffee thinned, then stopped. The little girl leaned forward once more, her eyes wide again, sensing something unfinished. The officer did not move. He stood where he was, watching, uncertain what would happen next. The man in uniform took one slow step forward. Not closing the distance. Just enough to anchor the moment. "Before you go," he said, his tone steady, measured, "I need a moment." Marcus's shoulders rose slightly with a quiet breath. Then settled. He turned halfway. Not fully facing him. Just enough to listen. His expression remained calm. Controlled. But there was something new in his eyes now. A question. The man in uniform met that look directly. No hesitation. No doubt. "It has been a long time," he said. The words were simple. But they landed with history behind them. Marcus's brow tightened slightly. Not confusion. Recognition trying to surface. Something distant. Something half-remembered. The officer's gaze shifted between them again. Faster now. He felt it too. Something was connecting. Something he had not seen at all. The waitress leaned forward just a fraction more. She could not hear everything. But she could feel the shift. The air had changed again. Not tense this time. Deeper. The man in uniform took another breath. His eyes stayed locked on Marcus. "You probably do not remember me," he continued. His voice softened slightly. Not weaker. Just more personal. That change mattered. Marcus turned a little more now. His body angled toward him. His hand lowered from the door. The distance between them closed, not physically, but in focus. The room followed that shift. The officer felt something tighten in his chest again. Not pressure. Something closer to realization. He was standing inside a moment he did not understand. The man in uniform nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. South Atlantic, he said quietly. 6 years ago. The words dropped into the silence like a stone into deep water. Marcus's eyes changed. Instantly. The calm stayed. But something behind it moved. A memory surfacing. Not fully formed. But close. Very close. The waitress stopped breathing for a second. She did not know why. But she felt it. The little girl blinked slowly, trying to follow something she could not see. The officer's grip tightened briefly on nothing. His hands were empty now. But the tension was still there. Marcus's gaze sharpened. He studied the man in uniform more closely now. Not the uniform. The face. The posture. The way he stood. Something clicked. A small shift. Then another. His head tilted just slightly. You were there, Marcus said. His voice was quiet. Lower than before. But steady. Certain. The man in uniform nodded once. A simple movement. But it carried confirmation. The officer felt the weight of that exchange. It settled into him slowly. This was not just recognition. This was something else. Something earned. Something lived. The man in uniform took one small step closer. Not to close distance. To meet it. He said. His eyes did not leave Marcus. And you were the reason we made it back. The words landed clean. No exaggeration. No performance. Just truth. The room shifted again. The waitress leaned back slightly, her hand lowering the coffee pot without thinking. The little girl's mouth opened just a little. She did not speak this time. She just watched. The officer's chest tightened. He looked at Marcus again. Really looked. And now, everything he thought he knew felt smaller. Incomplete. Marcus did not respond immediately. His jaw moved once. Then stilled. He looked down for a brief second. Then back up. His eyes held something different now. Not pride. Not relief. Something quieter. Something heavier. That was a long time ago, he said. The man in uniform nodded. It was, he agreed. A pause followed. Not empty. Full. The kind that holds more than words. The officer shifted his weight again. But this time, it was not to regain control. It was to stand properly. To adjust himself inside a moment he finally understood mattered. The man in uniform's gaze softened just slightly. Still matters, he said. And Marcus did not answer right away. Marcus let the words settle before he answered, and when he finally moved, it was not toward the door. He turned fully now. Slow. Deliberate. The distance between them felt smaller without either man stepping forward. His eyes met the man in uniform's again, steady and clear. Things like that are not supposed to matter later, Marcus said quietly. His voice carried no bitterness. Just fact. The man in uniform held that gaze. Unshaken. They always matter, he replied. Simple. Direct. No hesitation. The room felt it. The weight of something real passing between them. The officer shifted again, but this time he did not interrupt. He listened. Fully. The waitress lowered the coffee pot onto the counter. Her hands rested there, still. She was no longer trying to follow the situation. She was inside it now. The little girl leaned forward again, her eyes moving between both men. She did not understand the words, but she understood the feeling. Marcus exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped just a fraction. Not relief. Something closer to acceptance. He glanced down for a brief moment. Then back up. You made it back, he said. Not a question. A confirmation. The man in uniform nodded once. Because you stayed, he answered. The words landed softly, but they carried something deeper. A memory neither of them needed to explain. The officer felt it in his chest again. Stronger this time. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were forming something clear. Something he could not ignore. He looked at Marcus again. Not as a stranger. Not as a suspect. As someone he had misunderstood from the start. That realization sat heavy. The man in uniform shifted his weight slightly. His posture remained firm, but his tone changed again. Softer now. More personal. I did not expect to see you here, he said. Marcus gave a faint nod. Most people do not, he replied. A small line. But it carried meaning. The kind that sat beneath the surface. The officer noticed that too. Something about that answer stayed with him. The waitress glanced at Marcus, then at the man in uniform. Her eyes softened even more. She saw it now. Not just tension. Not just conflict. Something human. Something earned. The man in uniform took a slow breath. Then spoke again. You could have said something earlier, he said. Not accusing. Just stating a possibility. Marcus shook his head once. Small. Certain. It would not have changed anything, he said. His voice stayed even. Controlled. But there was truth in it. Clear. The officer felt that line hit harder than anything else. He looked down briefly. Then back up. His jaw tightened. Not in defense. In recognition. The man in uniform did not respond immediately. He held that answer for a moment. Let it sit. Then he nodded once. Maybe not, he said. But it should have. The sentence landed heavier than the rest. The officer felt it settle directly on him. Not shouted. Not forced. Just placed. Exactly where it belonged. The room stayed quiet. No movement. No distraction. Just that moment holding everything in place. Marcus looked at the officer now. Fully. For the first time since the exchange began. His gaze was steady. Not harsh. Not forgiving. Just clear. The officer met it. He did not look away. Not this time. His shoulders straightened slightly. Not to assert authority. To stand correctly. To match the moment. Sir, the officer said, his voice lower now, controlled, I should have verified first. The words came carefully. Chosen. Not rushed. Marcus did not answer right away. He studied the officer for a brief second. Then gave a small nod. Not approval. Not dismissal. Just acknowledgement. The kind that closed one part of the moment without finishing all of it. The man in uniform watched both of them. Quietly. His expression did not change much. But something in his eyes eased. The tension that had held there since he walked in had softened. The waitress let out a breath she did not realize she was holding. The little girl leaned back against the booth, her posture relaxing. The room began to breathe again. Slowly. Carefully. But the moment was not over. Not yet. The man in uniform turned his head slightly toward the officer. His gaze sharpened just a fraction. There is one more thing, he said. The officer's attention snapped back immediately. His posture adjusted without thinking. The weight returned. Not the same as before. Different now. Focused. The man in uniform held that look for a second. Then added quietly, "This does not end here." The words stayed in the air longer than expected, and the officer felt them settle somewhere deeper than instruction. He did not respond right away. His shoulders tightened, then steadied again. "Sir?" he asked quietly, unsure what direction the moment was about to take. The man in uniform did not raise his voice. He did not step closer. He simply held the officer's gaze. "A report does not end when a mistake is corrected," he said. Calm. Measured. Each word placed with intent. The officer nodded slowly, but the movement lacked confidence. He understood part of it. Not all of it. Not yet. The waitress shifted her weight again, her fingers resting lightly against the counter. She was listening closely now. Not out of curiosity. Out of something closer to respect. The little girl leaned forward again, sensing something serious but quiet. The room had not returned to normal. It had changed shape. The man in uniform continued, his tone steady. "It continues with how that mistake is acknowledged." The officer's jaw tightened. Not defensive. Thoughtful. His eyes dropped for a brief second, then lifted again. He knew this moment mattered. He just did not know how to move through it yet. Marcus stood still, watching now. Fully present. His posture had not changed, but his attention had. Focused. Direct. The man in uniform glanced at him briefly, then back to the officer. That look alone carried expectation. The officer felt it clearly. He inhaled slowly. Then stepped forward. One small step. Closing a distance that had opened earlier. "Mr. Reed," he said, his voice controlled, quieter than before, "I made an assumption." The words came carefully. Not rushed. Marcus did not interrupt. He did not nod. He simply listened. The officer continued, his tone steady but strained at the edges. "I acted before verifying. That was not correct." The sentence landed clean. No excuse. No justification. Just truth. The waitress's eyes softened further. That was it. That was what the moment needed. The little girl tilted her head slightly, her expression easing. Marcus held the officer's gaze for a second longer. Then gave a small nod. Not approval. Not dismissal. Just acknowledgement. The man in uniform watched closely. Measuring not just the words, but how they were said. He gave a faint nod of his own. Not to Marcus. To the officer. A signal. Continue. The officer swallowed once. His throat moved. "I am going to document this properly," he added. The words were steadier now. More grounded. He was finding his footing again. Not through authority. Through accountability. The man in uniform nodded once more. "That is part of it," he said. Then paused. Just long enough to shift the weight again. But not all of it. The officer felt that pause immediately. His eyes lifted again, searching for what he had missed. The room leaned in once more. Quiet. Focused. The man in uniform's gaze moved back to Marcus. "What matters most is what remains after this," he said. The words were not directed at one person. They filled the space between them. Marcus's expression did not change much. But something in his eyes softened. Just a fraction. The officer followed that shift. He saw it. And for the first time, he understood what had been missing. Respect. Not in title. Not in position. In action. In moment. He exhaled slowly. Then straightened again. This time, it was different. Not rigid. Not forced. Aligned. He took one more small step forward. Enough to close the space fully. "Mr. Reed," he said again, "I am sorry." The words came out clear. No hesitation. No extra explanation. Just that. Simple. Direct. The room held still. The waitress blinked once, her shoulders dropping. The little girl smiled slightly without realizing it. Marcus studied the officer for a brief second. Then gave a small nod again. This time, it meant something more. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. The man in uniform let out a quiet breath. Barely noticeable. But real. The tension that had held since the beginning had finally shifted into something else. Something steadier. Something human. The officer stepped back slightly now. Not retreating. Just giving space again. Proper space. The kind that should have been there from the start. Marcus turned toward the door once more. His hand reached for the handle. This time, there was no interruption. No command. Just quiet. The man in uniform stepped aside again, his posture relaxed but present. The path was clear. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second. Then opened the door. The bell above it gave a soft chime. The sound felt different now. Lighter. But as he stepped through, the man in uniform spoke one last time, his voice low but firm, "We will talk again soon." The bell above the door faded into the morning air, and for a moment, no one inside moved. The space Marcus left behind felt different. Not empty. Changed. The officer stood where he was, eyes still on the door, as if the moment had not fully passed through him yet. His hand flexed once at his side, the absence of the cuff's purpose settling in. The waitress picked up the coffee pot again, but this time her movements were slower, more thoughtful. She poured into the same cup, though it had already been filled. The small overflow dripped onto the saucer, unnoticed. The little girl leaned back into the booth, her eyes still fixed on the door. "He did not look scared," she said quietly. Her mother nodded once, her hand resting gently on the child's shoulder. "No," she replied, just as softly, "he did not." The man in uniform remained still for a second longer, then turned his attention back to the officer. The shift was immediate. Not sharp. But clear. The officer felt it before he looked. He straightened instinctively. Not rigid. Just aware. The man in uniform stepped forward once. Closing the distance that had opened earlier. "What you felt just now," he said, his voice calm, even, "you need to remember it." The officer's eyes met his. There was no resistance left in them. Only reflection. "Yes, sir," he answered. The words came naturally now. Not forced. The man in uniform studied him for a brief second. Not judging. Measuring. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said. The word was quiet. But it carried approval. The officer exhaled slowly. His shoulders lowered just a fraction more. The weight of the moment had shifted into something else. Something that would stay longer than the scene itself. The waitress glanced toward the officer, then back at the man in uniform. Her expression had changed too. Softer now. Less guarded. She reached for a clean cloth and wiped the small spill from the counter. The motion was slow. Careful. Like restoring order after something had been disturbed. The man in uniform turned slightly toward the door. His gaze lingered there for a second. Not searching. Reflecting. Then he looked back again. "He chose not to make this harder," he said. The officer nodded once. "I understand," he replied. And this time, he did. The man in uniform's eyes held his for a moment longer. Then softened. "Make sure the next one does not have to choose that," he added. The sentence settled deeper than anything before it. The officer felt it clearly. It was not about procedure anymore. It was about what came before it. What guided it? He gave a small nod. Not out of obligation. Out of understanding. The little girl watched the exchange, her head tilted slightly. "Is he the boss?" she whispered. Her mother smiled faintly. "Not exactly," she said. "But he knows what matters." The girl considered that, then nodded once, as if filing it away. The waitress set the cloth aside and reached for a fresh cup. She filled it halfway this time, then placed it near the edge of the counter. Something about the room felt balanced again. Not the same as before. Better. The man in uniform adjusted his sleeve slightly. A small, practiced motion. Then he stepped back. Giving space again. The officer remained where he was, his posture steady, his gaze no longer searching but settled. The moment had passed, but its weight remained. The man in uniform took one last look around the diner. Not at the people. At the space itself. Then he turned toward the door. His steps were measured, quiet, the same way he had entered. The bell chimed again as he pushed it open. This time, the sound felt different. Familiar. As the door closed behind him, the officer finally moved. He reached for his radio, then paused. His hand hovered there for a second. Then lowered. He looked down at the report in his hand. The blank lines waiting. This time, he read them differently. Slower. More carefully. The waitress glanced at him once more, then returned to her work. The little girl slid back into her seat, her curiosity settling into something calm. Outside, the sunlight stretched across the pavement, steady and warm. Inside, the air felt lighter. Not because the moment was gone. Because it had left something behind. And the officer knew that the next time would not feel the same. The pen hovered above the paper, and for a moment, the officer did not write. The lines in front of him looked the same as they always did. Clean. Structured. Ready to be filled. But something about them felt different now. He adjusted his grip slightly. The tip of the pen touched down, then lifted again. He exhaled slowly. The waitress watched from the counter, her movements quiet, deliberate. She wiped the same spot twice without realizing it. Not because it was still dirty. Because she was still thinking. The little girl swung her legs under the booth, softer now, her earlier tension gone. She glanced toward the door once, then back at her plate. The moment had passed for her. But not for him. The officer lowered the pen again. This time, he wrote. Slow. Careful. Each word placed with more attention than before. No shortcuts. No assumptions. The way it should have been from the start. He paused after the first line. Read it again. Then continued. The room moved around him now. The soft clink of dishes. The low murmur of voices returning. Life resuming. But it felt quieter than before. More aware. The waitress stepped closer, setting a fresh cup of coffee at the edge of the counter near him. She did not say anything. Just placed it there and stepped back. The officer glanced at it, then up at her. She gave a small nod. Not approval. Not judgment. Just acknowledgement. He nodded back. Small. Grateful. He returned to the report. His handwriting steadied. The details came clearer now. Not just what happened. But how it happened. Why it mattered. He stopped again. Just for a second. Then added one more line. Something he had never written before. Something that did not come from procedure. It came from understanding. The pen lifted. He leaned back slightly, reading it through. Once. Then again. The words did not change. But they felt right. The little girl looked over at him, curious again. "Is he done?" she asked softly. Her mother smiled faintly. "He is finishing," she said. The difference mattered. The officer heard that. He closed the small notebook slowly. The sound of the cover settling felt final. Not just the end of a report. The end of something else. He placed the pen beside it. Straight. Aligned. The way things should be. The waitress returned to her work, but her movements carried a quiet ease now. The room had settled into a new rhythm. Not the same as before. Better. The officer stood up. His posture was different. Not rigid. Not forced. Grounded. He adjusted his jacket slightly, then reached for his radio again. This time, he did not hesitate. He spoke clearly. Reporting. Not defending. The words came steady. Honest. When he finished, he lowered the radio. No rush. No tension. Just completion. He looked toward the door one last time. The sunlight outside stretched across the pavement, bright and steady. Marcus was gone. But not really. Something of him remained. Not visible. But present. The officer felt it. The reminder. Quiet. Constant. He took one step toward the exit, then paused. His eyes moved across the diner. The booths. The counter. The people who had watched. Who had waited. Who had seen. He gave a small nod. Not to anyone in particular. To the moment itself. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The bell chimed softly as he pushed it open. The same sound as before. But it did not feel the same. Outside, the air was warmer. Lighter. He stepped out and let the door close behind him. Inside, the waitress poured another cup. The little girl picked up her fork again. The room moved forward. Quietly. Naturally. As if nothing had happened. But everything had. And somewhere down the street, Marcus kept walking, steady and calm, without ever looking back.